we dive into a very different part of history: how people in the Middle Ages dealt with their most private needs. During the late medieval era, there existed one of the most unusual positions in royal households: the groom of the stool. And no, this stool had nothing to do with sitting on chairs. This position involved assisting kings in one of the most intimate and least glamorous tasks imaginable. Surprisingly, it was not a role of humiliation, but one of trust, closeness, and even political power. Thinking about this unusual office made us realize something: wiping and cleanliness in the Middle Ages is far more fascinating than one might expect. From leaves and moss to scraps of cloth, people experimented with all kinds of methods to stay clean. Their choices reflected both necessity and the materials at hand. Even in castles, where luxury and ceremony surrounded royalty, the most basic needs still had to be met. And those who helped with them held surprising influence. The topic may sound crude to modern ears, but it reveals a human side of history, reminding us that kings and peasants alike shared the same daily struggles. So, instead of heart-shaped tokens or sweet tales, today we share this curious story from the past. Strange, intimate, and oddly memorable welcome to the world of medieval bottom wiping. From the earliest days of civilization, humans experimented with countless natural tools for hygiene. Moss, feathers, leaves, grass, even sticks, or in desperate cases, simply their own hands were all possibilities. Snow and water rinses were also common, reminding us that necessity often dictated creativity. One of the earliest leaps in sanitation may have come from the Minoans of Bronze Age Crete, who are believed to have created the first flushing toilets about 4,000 years ago. Their ingenuity marked a step forward in dealing with life's most basic needs. In ancient Greece, wiping was done with smooth pebbles or fragments of pottery known as ostraka. What seems strange today was ordinary for them, combining practicality with what was available at hand. The use of ostraka carried a deeper irony. In classical Athens, these same shards were used for voting when citizens decided to exile someone. If enough names were scratched onto pottery pieces, the chosen person was banished for 10 years. From this practice came the word ostracism. Some researchers suggest a cruel twist, that pottery used in exile votes may have later been reused for hygiene. If true, the exiled person's name would literally be dirtied, turning a civic punishment into a lasting insult. Archaeological finds back this up. Smooth pebbles between 3 and 10 centimeters wide have been discovered in Greek and Roman toilets across the Mediterranean. Their rounded edges suggest care was taken to avoid injury, though the long-term results were far from gentle. Medical historians speculate that repeatedly scraping with coarse materials likely caused irritation, soreness, and even external hemorrhoids. Daily survival, however, left little choice. Comfort was a distant concern compared to necessity. An ancient wine cup from the 6th century BC, unearthed in Orvieto, Italy, vividly depicts this reality. It shows a man crouching with a cane for balance, clutching a pebble in the other hand. The image is both humorous and humbling evidence that even elegant Greeks faced undignified routines. Greek proverbs also reflected this frugal spirit. One maxim declared, 3 stones are enough to wipe. It was a reminder that simplicity, even in the most awkward matters, was considered a virtue. Communal toilets of the Roman Empire carried these practices forward. Across cities from Britain to North Africa, rows of stone benches with drainage channels reveal a world where privacy was rare and sanitation was shared. Romans are believed to have used a sponge tied to a wooden stick called a tersorium. After use, It was dipped into the water channel flowing beneath the latrines and rinsed before being reused. To disinfect, it would often be left soaking in a bucket of vinegar or brine. To modern minds, the idea feels anything but sanitary. The Roman philosopher Seneca recorded a grim tale involving this very tool. He wrote that a Germanic gladiator ended his life by hiding in a latrine and forcing the sponge stick down his throat. The image was shocking then, and remains disturbing now, reminding us that everyday objects could become instruments of despair. Interestingly, the tersorium may not have been limited to wiping. It might also have served a secondary role, much like a modern toilet brush. Whether for cleaning bodies or cleaning stone seats, it was a versatile, if unpleasant, part of daily Roman life. Archaeological evidence adds another layer. In the sewers of Herculaneum, the Roman town buried by Vesuvius in 79 AD, fragments of cloth were uncovered. Scholars suggest these could have been used for hygiene, though given the labor required to weave fabric, using cloth this way would have been a sign of true extravagance. Far from Europe, records in China point to a breakthrough in comfort. As early as the 6th century, the official Yan Zitui wrote that while he would never use paper with sacred writings, plain sheets were acceptable for hygiene. This marks the earliest known reference to paper being used for such a purpose. By the Tang dynasty in the 9th century, outsiders were noting this practice. An Arab traveler in 851 AD remarked that the Chinese did not wash with water, but instead wiped with paper. For them, this method had already become a cultural norm. By the 14th century, production reached astonishing scales. In Zhejiang province, some 10 million packages of toilet paper, each containing thousands of sheets, were produced every year. This was not just a luxury, it was an industry. Imperial records from the Ming dynasty show that Emperor Hongwu's household alone received 720,000 sheets annually. Even more remarkable, 15,000 of these sheets were reserved for the emperor's family and made from especially soft, perfumed paper. Hygiene had become not just necessity, but refinement. Yet not everyone was convinced of paper's superiority. The French satirist François Rabelais, writing in the 16th century, gave his character Gargantua a humorous exploration of alternatives. Velvet masks, stuffed animals, and even live cats were tried, all with comical and disastrous results. Gargantua's conclusion was clear. Many materials caused discomfort or even injury, making them unsuitable. The exaggeration was meant to entertain, but beneath the humor lay a truth. Humanity has always struggled to balance necessity, comfort, and imagination in one of life's most basic acts. The character Gargantua dismissed paper altogether, claiming it was ineffective, since, as he joked, it left a smear. Instead, he declared there was no substitute for a soft gosling. Satirical and crude, the tale nevertheless highlighted the timeless quest for comfort in cleaning. When Buddhism spread from India into China and Japan, monks brought with them a tool called the che, or salaka stick, carved from bamboo or wood. These spatula-like devices had cloth-wrapped ends and were used to scrape clean after defecation. They were washable, reusable, and affordable, qualities that made them popular for centuries. Archaeological proof came in 1992 when researchers uncovered 2,000-year-old bamboo sticks from the Han Dynasty military base at Dunhuang on the far eastern edge of the Silk Road. The preserved cloth tips still carried traces of human waste, and within it, the remains of whipworm, tapeworm, roundworm, and liver fluke, a sobering reminder of the health risks that plagued ancient sanitation. Across the world in Tudor England, hygiene took on a political dimension. In the late 15th century, Henry VII established a new royal department, the Privy Chamber. It was created to enforce a stricter boundary between the king's public and private life. At its heart was the most unusual post of all, Groom of the Stool. The Groom of the Stool was no ordinary servant. He was tasked with helping the monarch during his most private moments, including managing the close stool, a portable commode. Duties likely included assisting with clothing and even wiping and washing the king. It was a position both humiliating in duty and astonishing in influence.
Majesty.
As royal courts moved from palace to palace, the Groom of the Stool accompanied the king everywhere. His closeness to the sovereign meant unparalleled access,
Your Majesty,
making the role one of trust
hunt are complete.
and, unexpectedly, power. For ambitious courtiers, the post could serve as a stepping stone to wealth and political dominance. The royal close stool was not simply a chair, but required elaborate arrangements. A private room was chosen, often close to the king's chambers, furnished with curtains for discretion, bowls of water, and towels for cleaning. The gentlemen of the Privy Chamber stood nearby, prepared for undressing and redressing, a task made complicated by the thick layers and heavy fastenings of royal attire, especially in winter. Henry VIII entrusted this delicate office to Hugh Deniz, a man of noble lineage whose grandfather had been a knight. Deniz proved more than just a royal attendant. He married into influence, assisted the king in his most private moments, and eventually rose to the position of treasurer. His career showed how intimate service could open the door to wealth and authority. The establishment of the secret chamber, as historian David Starkey noted, dramatically expanded the groom's role. No longer a mere attendant, the Groom of the Stool became head officer of the king's private department, controlling access to the monarch and managing daily necessities. He even oversaw the royal accounts, which evolved into what became known as the Privy Purse. When Henry VII ascended the throne, he elevated his trusted companion, Sir William Compton, to the role. Compton not only performed the intimate duties but also gained immense favor. In addition, 6 esquires of the body were assigned to attend the king each day, waking him in the morning, dressing him, feeding him, and putting him to bed at night. The office of intimacy had transformed into a circle of elite service. The position of Groom of the Stool faded after the reigns of Mary and Elizabeth. By then, the monarchy's private and public lives had shifted, and female sovereigns made such a role less practical. The last to hold the position was likely Michael Stanhope, who served Edward VI. His own brother met a tragic end, executed for felony before the young king's death. Under the Stuart dynasty, the office was reshaped. It became known as the Groom of the Stool, a position tied more to the monarch's clothing than to the intimate management of bodily functions. Though stripped of its original duties, the role still carried influence, reminding us that proximity to the sovereign, no matter the context, always brought power. For most people in the medieval and early modern periods, chamber pots were the norm. A handful of straw, moss, or anything absorbent at hand was often enough to finish the task. Simple, rough, but practical. By the 18th century, some who could afford it found more unusual solutions. In a letter from 1747, Lord Chesterfield described a friend who carried with him a copy of Horace. He would read a few pages in the privy, then use them for hygiene, sending the verses on their final journey. This curious ritual was framed as an offering to Cloacina, the ancient Roman goddess who presided over sewers. Far from being forgotten, she even had a shrine and a small cult dedicated to her, proof that sanitation had a place in both the sacred and the practical world. The real revolution came in the 19th century. In 1857, New Yorker Joseph Gaetti introduced medicated paper for the water closet. Marketed as a necessity, not a luxury, it was promoted as safer than printed sheets, which contained inks and chemicals harmful to the body. By 1880, England granted a patent for toilet paper, and innovation continued until the 1930s, when the first soft cushioned versions appeared. For the first time in history, comfort became as important as cleanliness. Even so, old habits lingered. Throughout the 20th century, many in Britain relied on squares of newspaper hung in outside lavatories. In America, earlier centuries saw dried corn cobs in use, later replaced by newspapers and magazines. The Farmer's Almanac, printed since 1792, was so popular for this purpose that the publishers began drilling a hole in the corner of each copy, ready for hanging. Today, hygiene has reached a level unimaginable to our ancestors. Indoor plumbing, flush toilets, and bidets are standard in many places. Toilet paper itself comes in endless varieties: quilted, scented, moistened, infused with aloe vera, coconut oil, or even unusual fragrances like vanilla, sugar plum, or rhubarb. From moss and pottery shards to scented luxury rolls, the story of wiping is one of constant adaptation. It reminds us that behind the grandeur of empires and the philosophies of sages, people have always shared the same simple, daily need. And in that, the march of history is more human than we often imagine.